I'm actually not fully sure if this is in focus, but just note that I look pretty. Hey everyone! I hope you are well, or as well as you possibly can be. My name is Jasmine Kylene. I'm a spiritual counselor, I am a journalist, and I am a girl with chipped nail polish because I'm, you know what, fuck inner child healing, I'm doing inner adolescent healing. I feel like I am revisiting like who I am and what I needed at age like 14 to 17. She was really about like the Demi Lovato vibe, and that's kind of what I'm at right now, minus the, okay, whatever. Anyway, I hope you are well, or as well as you possibly can be. I'm feeling a lot of things, and so I was like, why not turn on the camera and talk about them? I want to immediately give a disclaimer that whenever I'm doing any sort of like astrology talk, of course this is something that I've like studied and been so invested in for many, many years of my life, but I'm never coming from a point of claiming that I have like substantial expertise to be right or like more knowledgeable than anyone else. I think if anything, astrology is a beautiful science that is so up for the interpretation of the reader, and I think, you know, two people who are well versed in this world can look at the same placement or transit and have completely different takeaways from them, and neither are wrong nor right. It's just all a story that is told through different lenses, and if you resonate with the way that I tell the story, then that's amazing, and if you don't, then like no need to tell me that I'm wrong, because I never claim to be right. But with that being said, I'm having some pretty heavy Saturn transits happening to me right now, and they've inspired me to really talk about Saturn. So for context, I like started off this year in like a place where I felt like I was bulletproof. Like I had such a crazy year last year, and I feel like I really stepped into a place where I was so aware of my power and my magnificence, and nothing could rock me, and everything in my life was going very, very right. And I knew as an astrologer, and also like as an astrologer who works with other astrologers, I knew that like a certain transit was coming up, and that was Saturn conjoining my sun and opposing my moon and also conjoining my Mars. I knew it was coming up, and I had this fear. Like I just had this impending doom that I was like, I'm feeling so good, you know, my love life is good, my work life is good, my confidence is good, like I don't need Saturn to come in and take any of this away from me. And so I was just so scared that everything was gonna kind of implode on itself. And I was like, okay, you know, don't psych yourself out, you know, we create our realities, and so if you have this like fear-based thought pattern, you're gonna create that for yourself, and like Saturn is gonna beat your ass. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna, you know, control this transit. I'm gonna make sure that when it comes, I only take the parts of it that it is calling for me to be more disciplined, and I'm gonna understand that it doesn't need to take anything away from me. What's mine is mine, and like this whole thing. Long story short, the transit is here, and so much of what I invested my peace into has imploded, and I'm constantly experiencing like 7 different emotions at once, but the loudest emotion right now is gratitude. And so I really want to talk about why we should not and cannot fear Saturn, and why it is so important that we work with Saturn, because Saturn is our key to self-mastery. Truly, I think that obviously, you know, when I do chart readings, I put a lot of hyper focus on our North Node, right? And how when we follow our North Node, we sort of align with our fullest potential, or, you know, our purpose. But I want to emphasize the fact that Saturn, and where Saturn shows up in our charts, is indicative of where we achieve a slow burn in terms of self-mastery, and where we kind of meet walls and restrictions and if anything, self-imposed limitation, so that we can understand how to set our own selves free. And so I want to talk about that, not only because am I going through really loud Saturn transits right now. I feel like if I'm not coming off as like the most, I'm a Capricorn Mercury natally. Well, funny enough, wow, 3 tangents at once. Aquarius was traditionally ruled by Saturn. Now it's sort of believed that either it's ruled by Saturn and Uranus, or that it's a Uranus ruled planet. I subscribe more to the fact that Aquarius is Uranus ruled, but I totally understand why it would have traditionally been ruled by Saturn. But right now it's sort of assumed and understood that Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So like I have my Aquarius sun, I have a Capricorn Mercury, I have Aquarius, I have have a Capricorn stellium in the second house. Like a lot is going on with Capricorn in my personal chart, and I just feel like right now I am in such a Saturn place. Like, if you're not just seeing Saturn through this camera right now, I am Saturn right now. I mean, it's in my second house and it's hitting my sun and it's hitting so much, but I do want to say that right now, if you're watching this around time of upload, we are experiencing a Capricorn stellium, like cosmically. We have, I think, about 4 or 5 planets in the sign of Capricorn. We had we had 2 retrogrades in the sign of Capricorn, Venus and Mercury, and we are all under very heavy influence of Saturn. So I think this is a beautiful time to talk about it. And if you're not watching this around the time of upload, understand that after this or during this, if you want to go and check where Saturn falls in your chart, this will kind of color the story that Saturn is trying to sort of unfold for you. So yes, I think socially we have this like fear of Saturn, and I think Saturn, Daddy Saturn, does not play. The thing about it is that Saturn is not going to coddle you, and I always think of like Saturn as that like tough stepfather that like really loves you but shows you that love through tough love, because it wants you to experience the tribulations and the trials in order to understand your power and to meet your own power. It wants you to confront your fears so that you build your strength rather than like just telling you what the cheat code is, right? Go through the obstacle course so that you understand what traps look like, and so you build that endurance. And I just, yeah. It's funny because Saturn being the planet that rules Capricorn, I feel like Capricorns inherit this quality very loudly, but Saturn kind of wants to show us where we have our own self-imposed limitations. So like, yeah, for instance, I am currently having Saturn, like I said, conjoin my Sun and my Mars in the second house. And the second house, outside of finances, which I've experienced definitely some like tightness around money right now, but it's helped me sort of rework my relationship with money and like actually budget, which is nice because I needed to grow up and realize that I can't just buy everything I want all the time, Lizzie McGuire. The second house also rules what we value and where we find worth in the physical world, but also innately. So my self-worth has gotten the loudest beating ever, and I, in the beginning of this year, was kind of in like this odd situationship that I like wanted to go somewhere, and that's why I was so protective of it. I was like, Saturn, don't you dare take this away from me. And I couldn't be more grateful that Saturn took it away from me, because it really made me realize my relationship with rejection and how every instance that I've ever had with rejection, I let that tell me a story about myself. Anytime I had, you know, issues with, you know, father and abandonment, or I had one boy really break my heart, or like had a group of like girls in 6th grade be really mean to me, I let all of those instances of rejection tell me a story about my worth and my lovability. And I think Saturn was like, have you actually grown? You know, have you grown the way that you have said you've grown these past few years? Because if you have, let's have you face this, you know, Pisces, Venus, idealized, rose-colored lens relationship, and let's take it away from you. And let's see if you can look that rejection in the eye and say, I get to still believe that I'm worthy, and I get to still believe that I'm enough. And you cannot build that kind of tenacity and that kind of strength having it just be told at you or done for you. You need to be in the experience of your shit. You need to be in the eye of your own triggers. You need to kind of be in the heartbreak in order to understand what it looks like to be in your strength and to be steeped in your own power, and to still choose yourself even when it's difficult, and to still say no to something even when it feels good, because you know that you deserve better and best, rather than like what feels good and is ultimately a form of settling. So understand that if you've ever experienced, you know, perhaps a Saturn return, or, you know, any major Saturn transit like this one, honestly, if you're watching this and you're an Aquarius, if you're like a Deacon 2 Aquarius, or Deacon 3, but yeah, like just if Saturn is hitting you in a particular kind of way, whatever you think is being taken away from you, whatever you are having such a firm grip on control over, understand that it needs to be let go and released so that you can learn about and you can exercise the muscle that helps you stand in your worth, stand in your power. And ultimately, you know, Saturn is not about the pity party, because Saturn is not going to show you where things are done at you. Saturn is going to show you where the blocks in your life are self-imposed. And so this is so important, because it made me realize that like all the rejections that happened to me, for me, but to me, I've gone through those stories placing a lot of blame on the people that were mean to me, or the people that left me, or the people that rejected me, not realizing that the pain that I've suffered from those situations, I chose. Those were narratives that I desired. Those were narratives that I fed and nourished. I said, because that person doesn't think that I am enough, their perspective on me is superior to my perspective on me, because they are more powerful or they are more worthy. So I'm gonna let how they feel about me, or how I perceive that they feel about me, color how I feel about myself. I was surrendering so much of my power. And so Saturn will show us where we are forfeiting our innate magnificence. And it's so important to know that like, that, you know, whatever jail you found yourself in, and that jail can be a belief about yourself or a repeated pattern or a cycle, the door is wide fucking open, and Saturn is going to make you blindly hit every single wall until you finally are steeped in enough worth to like turn and look at that open door and say, oh shit, I can set myself free. I can make a new choice. I can feed a new belief. I can change the narrative. I can rewrite this narrative. And so it's so important to note that like when it comes to a Saturn transit, or just working with Saturn in your chart at all, and I'm gonna go through what Saturn looks like in every house, and what like the slow burn of your life is gonna kind of look like. But ultimately understand that those restrictions are so that you can be cornered in and boxed in and have to turn all of that blame and aggression inward and say, hey, how have I put myself in this corner? How have I built safety in my own suffering? And I've made, you know, the noise of chaos almost be my white noise. And how can I make a new choice? How can I let Saturn be the mirror that says, like, do you want to be in your full potential? Because you wallowing on this couch because someone was mean to you in the 3rd grade and now you think that you're like unlovable, you know, that's fine, you know, let that process. But like, if you stay there, you're gonna stay there. Or if you make the new choice and face and confront your shit and decide that you're gonna take back your power and that you're going to rewrite the narrative of how you feel about yourself, you can actually step forward. You can move forward. Oh, sorry, that was a notification. You know, Saturn is a planet that rules discipline. And so where it shows up in our charts, and whenever we have a strong transit, honestly, like we're all having right now, it's really gonna show us where we need more discipline in order to achieve self-mastery. So like I said, right now it's currently transiting my 2nd house and it's hitting my sun. And so I realized that me achieving self-mastery is being so hyperactively disciplined when it comes to self-resourcing my validation. I think I have lived a lot of my life bouncing off how I felt about myself from the feedback of external sources, whether it was online or, you know, my romantic interests, or just like whatever I thought the world thought about me gave me permission on how I could feel about myself. And so Saturn is coming to say, if you really want to stand in your fullest potential, you first and foremost need to make sure that your self-worth is self-resourced, and that you are validating your worth, and that you understand and feed the truth that your worth and your power and your deservingness is innate, and it's not worked for. It's not something you need to perform for or ask for. You don't need to ask to be chosen. You need to accept the fact that you've already chosen yourself. So yeah, if you're watching this around the time of upload, wherever you have Capricorn ruling your chart, this Capricorn stellium, which is of course, like I said, the Saturn ruled sign, is really going to show us where you need to sort of rewrite those limiting beliefs that you have and confront your shit so that you can understand where it came from, and where you don't wallow in a pity party, where you take accountability, where you acknowledge, where you sit with whatever comes up, where you ultimately say, okay, I'm going to take my power back now by making a new choice, by rewriting the narrative, by releasing what does not honor my evolution, and by standing in who I'm deciding to be, and by being disciplined about it. You know, self-mastery requires discipline. So for instance, you have, you know, Capricorn ruled 5th house. You could limit yourself in terms of how much freedom you give yourself to play. And maybe you are someone, also if you have like Saturn in your 5th house or a Capricorn ruled 5th house, you may have either had an upbringing that required you to kind of be your own father a bit, or you didn't give yourself permission to play or to be a kid, and so that's showing up in probably a form of burnout or disconnection from creativity, or just like keeping yourself stuck in a productivity that doesn't even nourish you like on an emotional or spiritual level. And so understand that like being disciplined means freeing yourself from being so disciplined, funny enough. But just really reflect on where life is calling you to have more discipline that will pour into your self-mastery. Self-mastery is obviously going to look very different for all of us, but when you boil it all down, it just means being so steeped in your self-worth that you are not seeking anything outside of you, and that you are not chasing anything, but rather standing in such a high vibration of magnetism that everything just kind of finds you according to frequency. So understand that like self-worth and self-mastery are one and the same, and we can't just have our self-worth handed to us. We can't have it drawn on a whiteboard. We have to go through the shit. We have to dance with our triggers and integrate our shadows and understand, why it is that we built a comfort in our suffering, and why it is that playing it safe has, worked for so long. But like Saturn is really going to make sure that there's sustainable change, because the thing about it is that like, whenever we have any other planet making a lot of impact on our charts, it can, like for example, like when we had Venus was in Taurus for a good minute, and I remember that was just like the best time to pamper ourselves and to like reintroduce ourselves to pleasure. But the minute that Venus moved out of Taurus, it kind of went back to this energy of like needing to validate the reasons why we deserve pleasure, right? Like it wasn't a change that was that sustainable innately. Whenever we have Saturn working in our favor, it's always in our favor, but it can feel like it's working against us, but it's always for us. But whenever we have a Saturn transit or a Saturn moment, or wherever Saturn shows up in our charts, is where we need to make sustainable change. And that sustainable change is going to take time, because it's going so deep into our roots. So Saturn wants you to first and foremost, before anything, look at the root of where your limiting belief stemmed from. Where did that wound, where did that, attachment to a cycle or pattern or relationship that keeps you stagnant, where did it come from? Address it, hold accountability for others or yourself or both. Forgive who you can, cut off communication with who you need to. But ultimately, the process means letting it go. When we, I've had, oh God, ooh girl, I've had a relationship dynamic play out many different times in my life, where either I'm the emotionally unavailable one or the other person is emotionally unavailable, and like it just kind of got to a point where I was so sick of it, and I am so sick of it. I was really at a point where I was like, I need to release this pattern, I need to release this cycle, I need to figure out, where it came from. And when I boiled it down, of course, I was able to find all the, times where I experienced rejection or, my fears and da-da-da. And when you're doing that kind of shadow work, you can really get stuck in the story. Like, oh my God, I do this thing because this thing happened to me. And oh my God, how did I let this one thing happen to me? How can I hold that person accountable? How can I forgive? How can I da-da-da? It is so important that you do that, but it's important that you put a cap on how long you do that, because if you continue to go over the story over and over in your head, you are feeding it, you are fueling it. Your thoughts are magic, your words are spells. And so when you're continually, talking about it with others or revisiting it in your mind and recounting it, you're feeding it and you're growing it. It's important to give it its allotted time, its allotted attention, let whatever needs to move through. But Saturn is coming to say, close the book and let the story go. What happened to you, but that was then and this is now. And you can create your now. You can change your karma. The thing about it is that Saturn is also a planet that rules karma. And so sometimes what we experience in our, current realities is, we can go into past life stuff in another video, but like in our current lives, in this incarnation, a lot of what you are experiencing can be the result of how you treated, former situations or people in your life. And I know for my sake, in this kind of like micro heartbreak that I'm experiencing, I'm getting a taste of my own medicine, because what I had done to me, I have done to several other people. And so Saturn is going to say, hey, the ways in which you didn't consider other people's feelings because you just wanted to move with what your body asked of you in the moment, this is what that feels like. So recognize when Saturn is introducing you to your karma, but also recognize how in that moment you can decide what your new karma is. We can create new karma, we can create a new story, we can write a new story, right? Because you are deserving of what you desire, and because you have made mistakes, or because you have perhaps fumbled in this obstacle course of being human, that doesn't mean that you aren't deserving of something beautiful and delicious. It's just important that you take accountability and that you recognize where that stemmed from, what it feels like on both ends, but ultimately, what is your new story? How are you going to rewrite your new karma? How are you going to honor your worth? How can you protect your magnetism by saying no when you know you need to say no? And how can you empower yourself through your choices? So Saturn is working for you ultimately, and if you're in a Saturn return, I know those can be very difficult because Saturn returns tend to destruct everything that you've built a comfort in to show you in what ways are you not living in alignment with your authenticity or full potential. And it's so uncomfortable, but understand that discomfort is always going to be found in decay, but death is rebirth, and when an old version of us is dying and when an old story is ending, you have to give yourself permission to grieve and mourn that loss, but like grief and growth can exist in one breath. And as you are saying goodbye to an old version of you, an old pattern, an old story, even if it didn't serve you, it was still something you built to some degree a home in, and so it's gonna hurt, but I think anyone can attest, stepping out of that Saturn return and like the sigh of relief and knowing that you have grown into a version of yourself that is so strong and so just painfully aware of their worth and what they truly want is worth every part of that battle, because it's one thing to win a battle, but it's another thing to like withstand a war, and Saturn is going to teach you how to withstand a war so that you can create your own peace. If you're watching this, like I said, around the time of upload, really work with Saturn right now. Saturn wants you to evolve into your fullest potential, and you can't do that unless you confront your fears and you confront your anxieties, and you ultimately decide that you still get to choose yourself and you still get to write your own story, and your story is much more deepened when you go through the shit rather than over it or under it or around it. Like, you kind of have to go through your shit in order to understand it. So I'm sending you all my love, and I'm receiving any of the love that you're sending back, because as excited as I am to be in this transformational period, Saturn is not an easy energy to deal with. It's not happening at you or to you, and it's something to embrace, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. So I'm going through a lot of emotions, but it's all happening alongside you, and it's good to know that we have community. I've had like 12 people book emergency readings this week just because of how like loud this Saturn energy is, and we're all walking each other home. So yeah, I'm sending you my love. Thank you for walking me home. I hope that I got to walk you a short distance. But yeah, if you ever want to work one-on-one, you can do so by reaching out to me on Instagram at JasmineKylene, and visiting JasmineKylene.com, and you can subscribe for more content. See you next time.